Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Courage to Change, a recovery podcast. My name is Ashley Lowe Blassingame, and I am your host. Today, I will be interviewing Kimberly Russell. Kimberly's rock bottom was a serious suicide attempt that left her with a collapsed lung in a coma on life support. She got sober on July 2nd, 2017 at the age of 27. Since that time, Kimberly has walked through losing multiple relationships, her sponsor relapsing, a sexual assault, overcoming addiction to self-harm, sex and love, codependency, an eating disorder, and losing a job of 4 years. Her saving grace through every one of these experiences has been spiritual growth and dedication to working a 12-step program. Kimberly wouldn't change a single experience she's had because it has empowered her to discover her passion for helping others. It has forced her to be constantly self-reflective. It has pushed her to reach out for help and realize that there has always been something reaching back. All right, episode 33. Please enjoy and let's do this. Kim, thank you so much for being here, coming to the podcast booth.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Thank you for allowing my giant dog to be here.
He's a sweetheart.
He's sleeping.
He's a sleepy baby now.
Yeah. So we were just talking about you grew up in Anaheim in OC, so you stayed in OC.
Yes.
And you are sober. You got sober a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, 27. I have 2.5 years right
Awesome.
now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. When's 3?
Will be July 2nd of 2020.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me, like, from what I understand, you had a super loving home family, really relative, whatever normal is, you had that normal family,
Yes.
which I think is a really great story because we hear on here all the traumatic upbringings that people have. And I think it's awesome because there's so many people who are like, I didn't have anything. What's wrong with me? You know, almost like nothing to grasp onto and say, this is what happened. This is why I did this.
And it almost makes it more frustrating because I have nothing to point to and say to justify my behavior and to explain it away. I remember actually wishing that something terrible would happen in my life so that it would give me an excuse to do what I was doing.
Totally. And I think so often that people, it's like, I know people who did grasp for things where they would grasp for things to happen because otherwise it's like, oh no, it's just me in my head.
Yes.
So what was your childhood like?
It was very peaceful, a lot of love. I have, 2 parents who are still married to this day, who still love each other very much. I've never seen either of them call each other a name. When they would get into an argument or a disagreement, they would politely excuse themselves from the room and then go have a conversation until they felt like they were on the same page, and then they would come back and talk about it. So I had a really beautiful example of what a loving and functional relationship looks like. And I have an older sister and 2 younger brothers. We were all homeschooled together. We were middle class, so we never... we had clothes on our back. We had a roof over our head. We never had to worry about where's this meal going to come from.
Right.
And we were all homeschooled together, so we were very close. There was a lot of support, a lot of, sibling time together, parent time together. And it was just a very, normal upbringing. They were very conservative, so they did... I felt very controlled growing up. I felt that, I was very aware of the fact that they were filtering everything that was coming through to me and what I was exposed to. And so that was something that I, from a very young age, did not like and that I pushed against very hard.
Why were you aware of that?
I'm not really even sure. I'm somebody who is very sensitive to feeling controlled and feeling manipulated, and I have been since I can remember.
Yeah.
And I just noticed when, they would fast forward through parts of a movie, like if there was sex in it or if there was, the F word, they would, say, no, we're going to fast forward through this part. You can't watch it. Or my friends would be going to watch,
Got it. Okay.
They would watch the TV show Friends, and my parents would be like, no, you can't watch that.
Right. Okay. And so was that part of their decision to homeschool you guys?
That was part of it. It was mostly because of my older sister. She was reading by the time she would have been going into kindergarten, and my mom went to the public school, and they were kind of like, yeah, we want them to know their ABCs and to know how to count to 10. And my mom was like, my daughter's reading. And so she wanted to be able to have us skip grades. And so that was really the main reason. But then also, when they started becoming more religious, that was kind of an added benefit of it.
Yeah. And then, so they homeschooled you guys through 8th grade, right?
Yes.
And so, but then you went into high school.
Yeah, I went into regular school.
How was that transition?
For me, it was very, very difficult. I was terrified of letting people know how innocent I was and how little experience I had in all of the things that they were doing. And so I just started lying about everything. I would make up stories to fit in. I literally changed my identity based on whoever was around. I had no sense of self, and I immediately started trying to expose myself to all the things that I feel like I missed out on.
What did your siblings do?
Their transition was very normal. I think my sister experienced a little, they all experienced some mild bullying, but other than that, it was nothing like what I created mine to be.
So do you think that yours was based on who you went and sought out, or?
I think that was a big part of it. There were things that I would do and instigate, and I didn't at the time. I'm 14 years old, and I, struggle with social interaction, and I didn't realize I was doing it. But, there was like a girl who approached me and said, hey, I'm interested in this guy. Can you introduce me to him and set us up? And I, responded by going to her friends and talking badly about her and being like, oh my gosh, can you believe that she asked me to do this? And she's this, water polo player, and she comes and, she beats the crap out of me. And I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, I'm this innocent victim. And like, no, I went to her friends and I talked badly about her and I created this whole situation. But like, I didn't understand that.
Right. You didn't know the rules.
Exactly.
Like, you didn't know the rules of engagement.
Yeah.
Which would be really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting, when you were talking a little bit ago, I was asking, you said that your siblings didn't mind being homeschooled, but you hated it. And we talked about how, like, you would have hated school because you would have hated anywhere that you were.
Yes.
I obviously relate to that tremendously, which was like anywhere I was, I felt like shit. That was how being in my body, being in my skin, was that, when did you start to have that feeling or realization?
The earliest that I remember it is probably 5th grade, but it was just that feeling of I will be okay once I reach this destination.
Right.
I never wanted to be where I was.
Yeah.
It was always I need something else or I need somewhere else to feel okay.
Yeah. And did your parents notice that about you?
They did. They thought that it was just a phase originally, and I don't know exactly how young I was when they started kind of looking into options that might help me, but they, because I would fight to go to regular junior high school, and they said that, we know out of all the kids, you more than anyone needs to be homeschooled until high school. So they definitely knew that I needed to be where I was.
Do you think that saved you from using earlier?
I think it saved me from using earlier, yeah. I'm sure that I would have, gotten into things sooner if I had known where to go or how to get there.
Right, because you would have been seeking.
Yeah.
And when did you seek out, drugs and alcohol or some sort of outside coping mechanism first?
I was at a party my freshman year, and I was with some girls from the volleyball team, and they had a party, and I got there, And I look around and everybody's drinking out of red cups. And I was like, oh my God, what? How do I do this? And I look over and there's a liquor cabinet that's open. And I just see, a bunch of bottles of alcohol. And so I just go and I pour an entire red cup full of just straight aged tequila.
Oh, no.
And I don't know that people are, they mix drinks or that they I don't know what's going on.
What do you know about alcohol at that time?
I knew nothing.
You just knew it was alcohol.
I just knew it was alcohol.
Did you know it was intoxicating? You must.
Oh, yeah. I definitely knew that. I'd seen it portrayed in movies.
Okay,
and I'd heard friends talk about their experiences. And it was something I was definitely, I knew that I wanted to try it.
Okay.
And then it was presented to me. And so I filled up the whole cup.
Oh, my God.
I drank it in probably 15 minutes.
Oh, no.
And then I started to notice the change, and I started to notice my head get really quiet. And for the first time, I felt like I fit in my skin. I stopped caring and obsessing over everything. I didn't even realize how loud my head was until it was quiet.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so as soon as I felt that, I wanted more. So what do? I go and I pour another full red cup of aged tequila, and it's absolutely disgusting. I'm like choking it down, like in the corner, trying not to let anyone see the reaction that I'm having. And by the end of the night, I blacked out. I don't remember a whole lot. I remember walking around on the top of the sofa and yelling at people. That's about all I remember.
The fact that you remember anything after the first cup and having never drank before. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that's impressive or not, whatever. I don't know.
Impressive, concerning. It's a combination.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did get alcohol poisoning.
Oh yeah, okay, good. Then your body was responding in kind. Okay.
I threw up all over myself. So my friends dragged me out onto the driveway. They sprayed me down with the garden hose, and then they dragged me back inside, and they left me dry heaving on the bathroom floor. Right. And that was my first drunk.
And like when you got home, did anybody know, or like how did you play that whole situation off?
No, nobody knew. I stayed the night there. And
okay.
No, they didn't notice anything. I woke up and I said, I want to do that again every single day for the rest of my life. I love this.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the alcoholic response, which is like on the outside that sounds and looks like the most horrendous experience, but to us, the quiet of the head that we didn't even know was that loud, that experience, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like, oh my God, it'll make it stop.
Mm-hmm. And that's why in your story, I heard you say that you believe you were born an alcoholic, and I feel that's the same for me. I think that, my parents have asked me so many times, what could we have done differently to have prevented this, to have changed it? And I tell them nothing.
Yeah.
I believe I was born to be an alcoholic. I was born one, and nothing could have changed that.
The interesting thing about you being born into a normal, regular, whatever the words we want to use to describe calm family life is, on the one hand, it's like, yes, there's nothing to blame it on. So it feels like, oh, there's something wrong with me. But the flip side of that coin is when you do have trauma in your life, it's like, oh, it was there's this urge to blame it on the trauma. Like I have early trauma, but I don't think, and I've said this before, but I don't think that's what caused my alcoholism. Like, I don't think it helped it.
Yeah.
I think it may have been the reason why I started so young, or, whatever it was. But, on the flip side is that there's this idea when you have all this stuff, well, of course she drank. And when I think back to how I was thinking, like my thinking, that piece was always there.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my experience.
Yeah.
Too.
And you're validating that, which is like, you don't need a lot of trauma to still have the same thoughts and not want to be in your skin.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. So did you drink that way? Did you continue? That was the first drink experience. So going forward, did you figure out how to drink?
I did. I immediately...
More economically, at least?
Yes. I started asking friends at school who had older siblings, and I would give them money and have them, bring me alcohol. When I would go into a store with my family, I'd bring my backpack and I'd, throw a handle in there, and I would just steal alcohol. And I started going through our medicine cabinet to find anything that would change the way that I feel. I think... I did, cough syrup. There was some leftover painkillers, and I was smoking cigarettes, and, looking for men, for attention. I was self-harming, really anything that would change the way that I felt.
Did your family, given how put together your family sounds and this big transition, like if I'm your mom and you are trans and I know what it sounds like she knew about you, I'm going to be watching closely to see the transition, right? Especially if I was monitoring all the things that were coming in and that kind of stuff. Did she notice, or was there any, or were you just really good at hiding all of those things from her?
I lied about everything, which was originally how I started getting away with it. But in time, they did start to, they noticed the self-harm. They sat me down, they talked to me about it, and I told them, I don't know why I did it. And honestly, looking back, that's the truth. I had no idea why I was doing the things that I was doing.
What were you doing?
I was cutting myself with razors. I would drink alcohol in the morning before school out of a water bottle. I'd bring it with me to school. I would, smoke weed on lunch breaks.
So this was not social?
No, it was never social. I would endure people's company if that's what I had to do to get what I needed.
Right. But you had no desire for it to be social.
It made it easier for me to be social. So for me, I was actually relatively social when I was intoxicated. When I was sober, I wanted nothing to do with people. But once I was intoxicated, then all of a sudden I'm engaged in class. I'm, interacting with people. I feel like I'm connecting. I'm not so afraid of them. And everything just felt easier.
Yeah. Now, with the self-harm, did that just pop into your head one day or?
No, I don't even remember what show it was. It was something on MTV. And I saw somebody self-harming on the show, and I was just I saw it and I was curious. And I was like, I want to know what that'll do.
Yeah.
I want to know why that person's doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure your parents were freaked out.
Yes, they were terrified. And I don't really remember the ages at which everything happened, but eventually they did have me start going and seeing a therapist. Because they were just at a loss as to what to do. Was that
the catalyst?
I think they found this. I think it was a combination of self-harm and finding cigarettes on me. And I don't even know if at this point they knew that I was drinking. I don't think they did.
Right.
I think it was just those two things. And then they'd caught me in multiple lies. They'd caught me, my mom walked up. She was running around the high school campus looking for me, and she walks around the corner and sees me on the steps making out with this guy, and she just loses it and, drags me into the car. And, they would ground me. I was grounded for all of high school, but I would sneak out. I would lie. I'd say, well, I have to go to the school project and do this, and then I would run off and go wherever I wanted, and I'd sneak out at night. And so most of it was it wasn't so in their face.
Right, okay. And your siblings, what was their reaction to? Did they go to school with you?
My sister went to Troy, which was a magnet school. I didn't want to go to Troy, so I went to the local public school, and then I was transferred to a Lutheran school sophomore year just because of all the problems I was having. And my brother didn't start going until my senior year, at which point everything was they knew, and everything was completely out of control. But my sister's initial reaction when she found out, I think she thought it was just normal.
Yeah.
And I think she drank with me maybe once or twice, but she was, so wrapped up in her studies and trying to get into Columbia and, everything she was doing that I don't think there was a lot of time or thought put into it.
Yeah. Probably normal for the age range. So I was going to say when did it spiral out of control, but the two red Solo cups on day one is that's pretty out of control day one.
Yeah. My drinking and using was never normal. It was never social, and I never had any desire to control it.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did that change? Or how did you, so you get through you graduated high school, and you said that by your senior year, the cat was out of the bag.
Yeah. I was dealing drugs by the end of high school. I I started, it became an everyday thing for me. And the crazy thing was I was playing really high level of volleyball.
That's right. Okay, so you were playing volleyball, was that starting freshman year?
Starting freshman year, and then I played on varsity in the high school, and then I played on club teams. And so I think, to be honest, I think that's what helped me keep it together and stay at least mildly functional for a period of time, because I had to physically perform in order to, that was my freedom to me, because that's what was going to make me go to college and get me there. And that's what I wanted. I thought, well, once I get to college, I'll be happy. Yeah. And so, I think I held it together, and, I would play and I'd be intoxicated, but I wouldn't overdo it, because I knew I needed to, I knew I had things I had to get done.
Did the other volleyball players know you were intoxicated?
Some of them did. Yeah. Yeah. I was careful with who I let know. And and then the people who I wanted to know, I intentionally let them know, because I felt like I would be more accepted. And I thought it was funny that I could play when I was, really high or, really stoned or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. Yeah. It definitely was not, there was no, none of the normal social high school piece that you could say, well, I'm just in high school. This is just, we're just partying. It just never was that for you.
Yeah, no, I was doing, cocaine in the bathroom, and I would, I'd take too many pills, and then I'd have to run out of class, and I'd be throwing up in the hallway, just, not normal behaviors.
So then did the volleyball get you to the college that you wanted?
Yes, it did. And I went to Biola University, which is a small Christian school. And I still to this day don't know why I chose to go there, because you have to sign a contract saying that you won't drink, you won't do drugs, you won't smoke during the time that you're there. And I have no idea why. I remember I liked the coach and I liked the girls.
Did you think that maybe by signing that would turn things around?
No, because I had no intention
okay.
of stopping. Because my parents sat me down the summer before I went to school, and they said that you can either go away to school, because we're not paying for you, so it's your choice, or you can go to rehab. But if you get kicked out of school for doing all the things that you're doing, you don't have somewhere to come home to. We're done. They already cut me off financially. They were already, putting things in place to try and protect me from myself.
Right. So you go to this Christian university, and you sign a contract that you're not going to do any of the things you do daily.
Yep.
Okay. So how does that work out?
Not well. I actually lasted longer than I thought that I would. I was suspended, I was there for 3 years. I was suspended twice for drinking. I was, got in trouble for getting other girls on the team drunk. I was again selling drugs there. I was, involved in, the underground party scene. And, I never went to class. I would show up to practice, but I never went to class. I was on academic probation. And by the middle of my junior year, I drunkenly crashed my car into a set of Metrolink tracks up in central LA with a drunk freshman girl in my car, and had the cops called. And I didn't get a DUI, which was remarkable. Wow. But, my parents had to come get me, and it got spread around. And then for the school, that was their last straw. They said, we're done. You need to go find somewhere else to go.
And you were a junior?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they let me finish out the year, and then I transferred to Cal State Fullerton, also on a full ride for volleyball. And that the less structure I had in my life, the worse that I got. Because I'm somebody that I will maintain. I will check off the boxes that I need to check off to stay where I am, but I'm going to continue to do whatever I want in the meantime. Right. And so Fullerton got worse, and by, that season, I was so skinny, I couldn't really even play volleyball. I started the first, I think, 2 or 3 weeks of the season, and then after that, I sat on the bench the rest of my senior year because I couldn't play. I was throwing up. I would pass out at practice. And then by the end of that semester, I was living out of the locker room, smoking meth and heroin. I would steal bikes off of campus to get places. I would steal from the girls on the team. And I was, in my mind, I was like, I'm living my best life. This is what I've always wanted. And I was really content. And I was sleeping on a couch in the locker room.
How did you get in touch? Were you looking for meth and heroin, or just it was part of the next phase of what people were doing? Or I don't really know how it started. I think it happened very gradually and very naturally. It
was an organic process.
It was. I got to meth organically. I don't know about you, but
as my drug use progressed, the people who I was spending time with before that started to, pull away from me.
Right.
So then I started to pull more towards the people who were drinking and doing cocaine like I did, and then spend a little more time. And then they let you know, oh, actually, this is what we're doing on the side over here if you want to come into this back room. And that was kind of how it started. I think I was
always ready to go in whatever back room you had.
Yeah. So it was something, I don't think I sought it out, but in my actions, that's exactly where it took me.
Right. You just kept following. So, question. I tried to deal drugs. I am a terrible drug dealer. Now, I thought that, drug dealing equals making a lot of money equals paying for your drugs, right? That was the calculation that I did in my head. You were homeschooled, so you probably had better math skills than I did. But what made you decide to drug deal, and was that a good career move for you?
What's funny is actually by accident. So there was a guy, my sophomore year of high school, there was a guy in my art class who was in like his third senior year. He took like 6 years to graduate high school. And so I get in contact with him, and it turns out, he can get me literally any drug I want. And so I'm like, this is awesome. I'm,
marriage material.
I kept in close contact with him after he graduated. And then my friends started to hear, and I have no idea how this started to spread. I told a couple, I overheard somebody saying, oh, I'm like trying to get ecstasy. And I was like, oh, I can get that for you. And then they'd be like, oh, what else can you get me? I said, literally anything you want. And so that just started to spread around school, and people started to come to me. And then what's funny is that's how I started trying different drugs.
Right.
People would say, can you get me cocaine? And I'd say, yeah. And so then he'd bring me cocaine, and then I'd have it sitting on my desk. I'm like, well, it's here. I'm just going to try a little bit. And
would be weird if I didn't.
And then I started, whatever he would bring me, I'd take like half of that out for me, and then I'd double the price for that person and sell it. So it wasn't that I was a good drug dealer, but it was that I was a very dishonest one. And it worked because I was dealing with like, rich Orange County high school kids. I'm not dealing with like, gangs and people who are going to,
The rich kids are the best kids to sell
Absolutely.
to.
Yes.
Absolutely the best.
That's where you stay safe. And same at Biola. I made so much money just selling my Adderall because people are just trying to do well in school.
Right. Totally. That's a whole other thing of the Adderall thing, which is interesting. Like that's not considered drug use. Like people do not consider that like taking some or snorting someone else's Adderall as drug. I was like, you do know you don't have to snort it. Like you can actually take it as a pill. That was the original form. But like they're like, no, I'm going to snort it, and that's not using. I'm not a drug addict. Like,
just enhancing the experience.
Yeah, exactly. Just studying. It's interesting where we draw those lines, and where we tell ourselves or other people. I mean, for you, it sounds like your drug dealing was much more successful than mine. I didn't have a scale, so I would like buy weed and be like, "This looks right."
Where's it gonna go?
Yeah. Let me tell you, that didn't work. It only took a few times for me to be put out of business. Going out of business, sale immediately. So you're sleeping. So you have nowhere to live. Why do you have nowhere to live when you're at Fullerton? You had been kicked out?
I'd been kicked out of my parents' house, and they had said, I don't even know if I was kicked out, honestly. I think the conversation is probably that they said, you have to stop drinking if you want to live home. Here.
Yeah.
And I was like, nope, that's not going to work.
Looks like I'm homeless.
Yeah. And so I just decided to stay at school. I ended up...
And they didn't object? School didn't object?
Well, they didn't know. Yeah. I mean, I'm shocked that the girls didn't report me.
So you would just like get locked in there at night?
Well, so there was a code. And so I because I was on the team, I had the code. And so I would just come and go as I pleased.
They were like, she is dedicated to this team.
Exactly.
She will not leave this gym.
Yes. And it was, I mean, I think the girls just didn't care because they knew how checked out I was. Yeah. And they knew, like, they could see what was going on.
But that didn't piss them off? Like this...
I mean, I'm sure they weren't thrilled with it, but nobody nobody ever, confronted me about it or said anything to me. I think every now and then, the girls would ask, I think, they'd ask, is everything okay?
Yeah.
I think it was more concern than anything, to be honest.
Everything okay? Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. No, I'm doing great.
Hence the sleeping in the locker room. But thanks for asking. The nice thing about living in Orange County is like everybody will talk behind your back. If you were in New York, you probably would have gotten seriously confronted. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and that's the funniest thing. I had this girl who I'd stolen her bike. I'd taken it for days. And then I'm, walking back to put it back where it was. And she's standing there. And she looks at me and she goes, "That's my bike." And I was like, "Oh, well, here, I brought it back." And she goes, "Oh, thank you. I was almost late to work because I had to, I ride my bike to work. If you're going to take it again, can you just let me know?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, totally. Okay." Yeah. And I walked away. And it was like, if someone did that to me, someone stole my bike, and we're like, "Oh my God."
It's like just sunny enough that we're still polite to each other even when we're stealing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So how did you go? So what happened? Did you graduate from college?
I did eventually. I almost flunked out because I met these two guys who were hitchhiking through a friend, and there were 4 of us living out of my friend's car in Huntington. And
I hope it was a Suburban.
It was not. It was a little Subaru. And I really liked their lifestyle. I saw what they were doing. They had hitchhiked from Chicago.
Okay.
They had gone they were on their way up to San Francisco, and they ended up staying with us for a while in this car. And I loved the freedom that they had.
Wait. So they hitchhiked, and you had already secured the Subaru. So you were already living in the Subaru.
It was my friends, yeah.
Right, okay. So you guys were living in the Subaru. They hitchhiked and moved into your Subaru.
They met us, yeah. They were kind of also staying on a friend's couch in Huntington, so we would kind of bounce back and forth between the couches and the car, depending on how drunk we were or where we ended up that night.
Right. And you were like, this is the best freedom ever.
I looked at them and they just said, "We have no money. We do odd jobs," or like we'll play, one of them had a guitar and the other one had a drum, and they would play music for money on the side of the street. And they did whatever they wanted. They did drugs as much as they wanted, and they didn't know where they were going to sleep that night, and they just got around by hitchhiking. And I was like, I want to do that. And so, they left. I got super depressed, and I was trying to finish school, and I was like, I have no interest in this. And so one spring break, I flew out to New York to see a friend, and then we spontaneously took a road trip down to Cleveland, Tennessee, in like this weird Bible Belt area. And I found myself in a prayer barn and all of these weird situations, and it was a dry county. And so I was sober for like 3 days, and I thought I was going to die. And so I ended up stealing a one-pedaled bicycle that I could find, rode that outside of the county.
A one-pedaled bicycle?
One-pedaled bicycle, yeah. That was all I could find that wasn't locked up. And so I ride that bike to a gas station that's right outside the county line. It was like at least a couple miles, and I got really drunk. I missed my flight that next morning because I was still drunk. Went to the airport bar, had about 7 cranberry vodkas, and then decided I don't want to go home. And so I missed my flight, and I walked out of the airport, and I stuck my thumb out, and I hitchhiked from Tennessee to Denver, Colorado, where I ended up staying for, I think, another 6 months or something. And I flew back home to take my finals, so I failed half my classes that semester. And then I flew back to Denver and was like, I'm dropping out of school, and did that for a while.
But you eventually went back and graduated?
Yeah, I eventually went back. When I was in Denver and we were in a bedbug infested apartment, and the guy I was living with was super abusive, and I popped my bike tire, and I couldn't replace the bike tire to get to work. And I was just like, I'm so sick of relying on other people. And so that motivated me. I ended up flying back to Orange County. I was still like motel hopping, doing meth and heroin, but I channeled all of the motivation that I had into finishing school. And so I graduated.
Has that been useful?
In its own way, yes. I don't think it was necessary for me to get where I am, but I'm definitely grateful that I finished, if for no other reason than, so many of the classes that I took were really, really beneficial for me in just developing, because I got my degree in English, and I think in developing, critical thinking, the ability to communicate. My degrees I don't believe they qualify me for anything, but I feel like they've prepared me for a lot.
Okay. And so you went to Tennessee. You went with a friend, but the friend went home on the flight?
Yeah, she wasn't on the flight. She was continuing her drive down to Arkansas, where her husband was in anger management, and she was going to try and repair her marriage. I was supposed to fly home and go back to school.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got dropped at the airport and was just there by myself, so nobody knew where I was for days.
And those 3 days that you were sober, did you detox? Like, did you have symptoms of detox, or what you said you felt like you were going to die? Like, what was that like, that forced sobriety?
I thought that shaking was just part of a hangover. I thought that was just normal. So, the detox that I went through was, I think I threw up a couple times. I wasn't really able to keep food down. I just drank a lot of water, and it was pretty useless. And then my head was just really, really loud.
How long do you think it had been? And how old were you then?
I think I was 20. I turned 22 when I was in Denver. So yeah, I was like 21, 22.
So those 3 days, before that, how long do you think it had been since you had been 3 days with no substance use?
I don't know if I'd ever gone that period. Maybe like during
since
a long tournament. But yeah, I honestly don't think I ever had gone 3 days before that. I think I had one time on like a New Year's Eve resolution. I think after a bad hangover, tried to get sober, and I think I maybe went a couple days when I was like 19.
Yeah.
So there were a few times here and there where I would like string some days together. And I could go if I really, really needed to. I was able to go like, maybe a week without using.
Okay.
And it wasn't easy, but what got me through that week was the thought of, when am I going to be able to use again?
But you would drink alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get to Denver with the abusive boyfriend, but then you go back to OC and you graduate. Mm-hmm. And how old were you then?
I was 23.
Okay. And so you're back in OC, you've graduated, but you're still drinking the whole time?
I'm still drinking and using heavily.
Okay.
And
meth and heroin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And really anything I could find. It didn't really matter. I was someone who I was okay without drugs. If there weren't drugs there, I wasn't gonna freak out.
Okay.
But if I didn't have alcohol, it was like, I'm not okay.
Okay.
So yeah, that was more, drugs are a big part of my story, but I feel like for me, everything always started and ended with alcohol.
Yeah. So you graduate, now what?
So nothing as far as like plans. I originally wanted to be a teacher, and I was taking classes for the teaching credential program at Fullerton, and then I just realized I don't want to do this. I was coaching volleyball, and I was around the kids, and I didn't feel right. I was like, I'm not a role model. I'm not someone that they should look up to. Why am I even doing this? So what do I even think I'm here to teach people?
So that's interesting, because your story, you're talking about, like, a lot of this, it sounds like there wasn't a lot of shame. There was a lot of confidence in what you were doing. Mm-hmm. But then it sounds like somewhere in that 20 to 23 range, that started to change, because you saying like, I was like, I shouldn't be around people, I'm not a role model. Like, that sounds like a different tape running through your head than the years prior.
Yeah. And I think what shifted it was not wanting, I loved what I was doing for me. Never did I want to encourage anyone else to do that.
Right.
I didn't want to feel like I was leading anyone else down, the path that I had chosen. And yeah, I was very shameless about what I was doing and who I was. I still to this day don't believe that I felt guilt until I got sober.
Stay tuned to hear more in just a moment. Hi, it's Ashley, your beloved host. When I'm not hosting the Courage to Change a Recovery podcast, I'm running the recruiting department at Lion Rock Recovery. We are always looking for amazing licensed mental health counselors, along with various other sales and operations positions that pop up from time to time. The Lion Rock culture is one of collaboration, support, and flexibility. Our employees work from home offices all over the country, utilizing technology to connect to one another. We are always hiring. So if you want to have the best job ever, Check out our open positions and apply at www.lionrockrecovery.com/about/careers. So you didn't want to be around, so what did you do after that?
So what shifted for me, I was this guy who I had been in love with in high school had come back into Orange County. He had just gotten out of jail and he was sober. And I started, and he was someone who had always kind of come in and out of my life. And, we would get together and then he'd take off again and I wouldn't hear from him for like 6 months. And then he came back into town, he was sober, and I convinced him to relapse. And then he went out on a run and he overdosed on heroin and he passed away. And I think that was the first time that I realized that I need to change something. Losing him absolutely devastated me. I couldn't even enjoy being high. I was, hallucinating, and I just...
Were you there when he overdosed?
No, I got the call the next day. And that was the first time that I think I realized that, this isn't what I want for myself. And so I decided that I needed to clean up my life, at least on the outside. Of course, I never wanted to look internally. I never wanted to, be self-reflective or change who I was. I just wanted to change who I looked like.
Right.
And so I said, I'm not going to do any hard drugs. And I went and I got this job at a property management company. And, it's 9 to 5. It's in an office. It looks respectable. And I was like, I'm just going to drink. And I, for the most part, did that for about 4 years. And what I can tell you is that trying to pretend to be normal around people who are normal was far more painful and isolating than being homeless, than being on the streets and being in abusive relationships and being strung out on meth. That was, it was absolutely awful.
I think that's a really great point. I haven't thought about that in a long time, which was, so you talked about, I didn't use for as long as you did because I was not quiet or high. I just was in your face about all of it. But the times that, part of the reason why I was like that was that I found it too painful to try to fit it. Trying to fit in and trying to be normal and realizing that you're just not, and that it's just too hard and it's not, and you're doing a half-assed job of it, which is at best.
Yeah.
I found that to be so much more painful, like you said, than just being insane and living out loud. At least I could find my people, at least I could live in my truth. But when I would just try to keep, there was nothing more exhausting than trying to keep it together.
Yes, exactly. And I was in, during those 4 years, I was in a 1.5 year relationship with another alcoholic. And then I jumped from that relationship to another 1.5 year relationship with another alcoholic. And I think that was the only thing that even allowed me to do what I was doing for as long as I was, because once I got home, I didn't have to hide my drinking because, they drank the same way that I did.
Were you drinking at the office? Were you someone who had to drink all throughout the day?
I would wake up and I would take a combination of Adderall and benzos.
Okay.
And then on my lunch break, I would do a little bit of cocaine.
Okay.
And then I'd come home and then I'd drink.
Okay.
Until I was ready to go to bed. Then I'd smoke weed and go to bed.
Okay.
And I would do that
so you weren't
every
drinking
day.
during the workday?
No.
And the cocaine, benzos, and amphetamines were not considered hard drugs in your mind?
Nope.
Right, okay.
I just thought meth and heroin, those are hard drugs.
Right, exactly, okay.
I thought I was functioning and I thought I was doing it gracefully.
Right. So what happened after those years of holding it together?
I really, really started to unravel. I had made my whole identity work. I was working 70 to 80 hours a week. I didn't really have a life outside of work or an identity, and things at work were not going well because obviously I wasn't really functioning. And probably the last 6 months leading up to getting sober, I lost the relationship that I was in, which is, it's strange because I didn't even want to be in the relationship. But then when I lost it, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to be alone anymore, which was terrifying for me because I was someone that always used to be alone.
Yeah.
And, I started to watch the people around me growing up because at this point I'm 27. I'm now in my late 20s and I'm watching people change around me and people aren't drinking the same way that I am. And that's just me trying to drink normally. And they still don't want to drink the way that I want to drink.
Right, exactly. And you think you're like seriously I've done that too, where you think you're like, let's just keep it low key. And your version of low key is still heavy drinking for them.
Yes.
And I'll be going now.
Exactly. And so I just became very, very isolated. And what I started to realize was that, because this was when I really threw myself into it, when I didn't feel like there was anything holding me back because I wasn't in these relationships anymore.
Were you still working at the company?
I was still there. And every time I used or drank, I couldn't escape anymore. That was for me when I hit that point of that inevitable point for every, addict and alcoholic is when it stops working.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get high anymore. And even when I was drunk, it didn't shut my head off. And I would go into psychosis. There was one night I tried to throw myself off of a building. I tried to fight people. I assaulted a taxi cab driver. I tried to run into oncoming traffic to prove to somebody I was in a dream. Just weird, things.
How did you not throw yourself off the building?
I was with people.
Okay,
I'd gone down to San Diego to see college friends, and they were literally dragging me down a flight of stairs trying to stop me from doing that. And
fun night out for them.
It was, yeah. And then I would just wake up the next morning and be like, wow, last night was fun, wasn't it, you guys? Yeah, it just became, progressively more and more isolating. And so then I'm, to find people to drink with me, I'm going online, trying to, I can really, only strangers will spend time with me because they're the only ones that don't know my patterns. And I pretty much would wake up every morning and decide whether or not I wanted to kill myself that day. And I started self-harming again, which was something I thought I'd outgrown. And I could literally feel my mental faculties unraveling. And I started getting really, really crippling panic attacks. And I was someone that never had anxiety before. And I was just like, what is happening to me?
And you're taking benzos, so you'd think that,
Yeah, well, and I was terrified to go tell a doctor because I didn't want to lose my prescriptions.
Right.
And so I always was lying to my doctor's sitting here trying to figure out what on earth is wrong with me, but I won't tell him the truth.
Yeah.
And I had never really known anyone that had gotten sober. I'd never really had much experience. I had no experience with 12-step programs, and I truly believed that I was the only one in the entire world that felt the way that I did. Mm. And so one night I was, I think I'd been drinking for 36 hours straight, and I got back to, and because when I broke up with the last boyfriend, I'd moved back into my parents' house.
Oh, okay.
And so I was living there with my two younger brothers, and they ended up having to, someone had filed a missing persons report because they'd seen me drunk, and then I took off. I caused a scene at their place of work. I don't really remember much, but the police were out looking for me. My brothers were out looking for me. They ended up finding me with no shoes, walking down the street 7 miles from wherever I'd been seen last. And I didn't believe that they were who they said that they were. And they had to, tackle me, drag me into the back of the car, close the door. I tried to jump out of the car while it was moving. Naturally. They get me back home. They lock me in my room. And I'm just sitting there, and I was very drunk, but I do actually remember this. And I was just sitting on the bed, and I see, bottles of sleeping pills that I had saved up. And there was a bottle of Gatorade, and I just felt like, I'm 27. I think I've lived a long life, and I think I've seen everything that I need to see in this life, but I'm really tired, and I think I'm done.
Yeah.
And so I took about 70 sleeping pills, and I just remember sitting there and watching. There was the black around my vision, and it was moving in slower and slower. And then I just remember this feeling of panic of oh my God, I don't want to die. And I hadn't felt that feeling ever in my entire life. And then that's the last thing I remember. Apparently my brothers came in to check on me, and my breathing was really funny, and there were pills all over the bed, and they couldn't get me to wake up. And so they drove me to the hospital. And the doctor said if they brought me in probably even 5 minutes later that I would have been dead. And of course, my parents were out of town when all this is going on. So my two brothers are going through this by themselves. They are just completely at a loss. And
did they pump your stomach?
so they weren't able to pump my stomach because they said that my gag reflex was gone. And so they're not able to do that.
Oh my God,
and
really?
So, yeah. So they had to do what's called an electrolyte flush, which is basically where I have like 14 IVs in me. And they're having to flush my system.
Oh, wow.
And I had a collapsed lung. So they had to put like a balloon in my lung. And I was on life support. And I was in a coma. And, they said that my brothers literally saved my life.
How long were you in a coma?
I think a couple days. The first day that I remember was maybe 3 days or 4 days after I had overdosed. And I remember waking up in the hospital, and I had this very distinct feeling of I'm supposed to be here. And it had been maybe a week or two before that. I'd been driving my car, and I was really drunk, and I was driving over this freeway ramp, and I was having a panic attack, and I just started screaming and crying up at the sky, and I just said, if there's anything that is listening to me or that can hear me, please help me, because I don't know how to do this. And when I woke up in the hospital, I had this distinct feeling that prayer had been answered. And I just felt like I'm supposed to be here. I'm worth the space that I'm taking up, and I'd never felt that way before. And the only thing that I knew for sure was that I was supposed to be sober.
That's incredible. You woke up feeling that way?
Immediately.
I've never woken up from a run or an overdose or any sort of anything feeling like, yes, I am supposed to be here. That's different. That's different. I got to tell you, I don't think a lot of people feel that way.
No, definitely not. I don't know if I've heard anyone else that said that or felt that way.
No, I think most people wake up like, oh, what did I do? This is gonna be really bad.
Yeah.
Where am I? I think we have a lot of questions. Yeah, that's pretty different and remarkable that you woke up and I'm supposed to be with that belief. Honestly, I think it took me years into sobriety and a lot of work to get there, and that's really amazing.
Yeah, well, and I still didn't believe in a higher power that's necessarily super caring or super involved.
Right.
But I did definitely believe that there was something keeping me there.
Yeah. So then at that point you were off life support?
So yeah, I got, as soon as I woke up, actually, the first thing that I did was, and I was strapped down to the bed, but I hoisted myself up somehow and I ripped the breathing tube out, which they said did some serious damage to my throat. And because I just remember waking up and I couldn't breathe, but I didn't realize that the machine was breathing for me.
Right.
And so I was terrified. So actually all of that happened first. Then once I kind of settled down, then I started reflecting and recounting.
Okay, that's much more
exactly
normal.
how I'd gotten there. And then it was like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be here.
Did you remember, did you remember I took the sleeping pills? Okay.
But I was so terrified to be 5150'd, and I didn't know what they would do if I told them that I'd taken the pills. And so any questions they asked me, I just continued to repeat over and over again, I don't remember. And so I wouldn't even tell them.
They didn't 5150 you?
No, because they said that I wouldn't admit to it being on purpose. And so they didn't 5150 me.
Who takes 70 sleeping pills by accident?
I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do they think that that's a thing?
Well, no, I think that they knew that
But they can't 5150 you unless you admit to it?
Yeah, because I wasn't suicidal in that moment.
Interesting. I got 5150 for overdosing on heroin. I was not, and I was not intentionally doing that.
Yeah, it was very strange because my mom kept coming in and saying, the doctors need to know if you're suicidal or if you did this on purpose. And I knew why she was asking me because I was like, no, they're going to lock me up. I don't want to go there. And I was just like, no, I'm fine. I feel fine. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Too much partying. And
too much partying.
That's all I would say to people. Just, I don't remember.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. So then how long did it take you to get out of the hospital?
I got there on a Saturday night and I was released on a Wednesday night. I still couldn't really walk. I couldn't really keep food down. And I, felt like, okay, this is going to be it. This is when I change everything for myself.
Yeah.
And so I got back home, and then I think probably the first day that I was really able to walk and function was Saturday. And I left my house, not with the intention of getting high, but I left my house and I was high again that night. And that was when I realized, no desire to stop was going to be enough, that I needed outside help, that I had no idea what I was doing, that I was completely out of control. And for the first time in my life, I was terrified.
Yeah.
Because
you used against your will, right?
Exactly. Because this whole time I thought, well, no, I've just never wanted to stop.
Right.
That's why I couldn't stop. And then...
There is nothing like that feeling of like, okay, no, seriously, I want to stop. And then your body does something against your mental will. It's like, you're like, oh no, I'm in so deep. Like, I don't even know how to, like, you know how insane that sounds. So you don't know how to tell people because, first of all, you've already been labeled a liar and a cheat and a thief and all these things. So to go and tell someone like I used against my will, you're like, no one's going to believe me.
Right.
Like that's an insane thing, but it literally is what happens.
Yeah.
So how did you get that help?
I had already been going to a therapist that was in addiction medicine, and I was going to her for, trauma and anxiety. And she had, before, all of this had even happened, had already suggested that I go to rehab. And at the time I had said, absolutely not. And so she was the only person who I knew to go to. So I went back to her. And she recommended that I go into treatment. And so I went through a day treatment program through Kaiser that was 30 days. And, you're there all day long and you just go home to sleep and they drug test you every day. And they teach you about the disease model of addiction. And I start, all of these pieces started falling together, explaining why I was the way that I was. And everything started to make sense. And, that program, really promoted it, going to a 12-step program. And so they didn't take us there, but they, we had a signature card that we had to go get signed every week. And so I started doing that. And then there was a family night at Kaiser. And so, my family came. And I finally, for the first time, was honest with them about everything I was doing. And they were extremely, extremely supportive. And I think just relieved. They were relieved that I was alive. They were relieved that for the first time, I was admitting that I had a problem and that I was doing something about it. And so I was at a family night at Kaiser, and I met this girl who was a sister of someone who I was in treatment with who had a year and a half sober. And she was pumped on life. Like, she was so stoked about sobriety, and she was just on fire. And, she shared at the meeting and was just like, if anyone needs anything. And then she comes up to me afterwards and gives me her number and says, we are going to be best friends, and I'm going to take you to all of my meetings, and it's going to be great. And like the first thing going through my head is like, this girl is not sober. She's way too happy. She's not sober. But she was happy. And I was like, well, if she's happy, I want to feel the way she's feeling. Right. That looks awesome.
Right.
So I followed her to those meetings, and that was where, I found a group of people that were, primarily young people that were very rowdy, very loud, and very fun and very boisterous, but took their sobriety very, very seriously. And so I think my first meeting there was 11 days sober, and I've never left since then. I think I was very lucky to have basically had somebody show up and just take my hand. And, I still did the footwork. I still pushed through the discomfort to get there, but I think there were, looking back, there's just all these little guides that were there for me and that guided me through everything. And all I had to do was just, put one foot in front of the other. Yeah. And, things fell into place for me very, very naturally.
Has your sobriety been like pretty, what's the word? Like, have you, we talk about being on a pink cloud and, have you had moments where you've questioned your sobriety, or what were like some of the big change points?
Yes, I do think to a certain extent I experienced a little bit of a pink cloud, and so I don't like that term for some reason, because for me, honestly, I still feel like I am on one in the sense that I feel really, really, really good most of the time. And that has never changed for me as long as I'm doing everything that I need to do for my sobriety. I think the first big change for me was vulnerability, was opening up. That was very, very difficult for me. I was extremely closed off. I was very skeptical. I was very quiet, and people terrified me. And for me, I felt like I was in a position of power if people didn't know how I was feeling. And so, my first sponsor was this, she was like a 23-year-old high school dropout. She was a total hippie. She believed love was the answer to everything. And I was like, I do not want what this woman has, but, she's my sponsor. And so I'm going to do what I need to do. And, I think it took me like 5 or 6 months to have a conversation with her that was longer than 5 minutes. And to just open up and let her know what was going on in my head, to let other people know what I was feeling and what I was thinking. And, when we have alcoholism, which is in our head, it's so important that we're doing that.
Yeah.
Because anytime we're holding something in, you have guilt and you have shame, and then it gets so much bigger than it actually is, and it holds so much power. And we literally just have to say it out loud to remove that power from it. And I was very unwilling to do that in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I got into a lot of pain.
Yeah.
I was very isolated. I was around people, but I wasn't really letting anybody in.
Yeah.
And then over time, I started to watch, people share their stories, and I started to watch them heal and get better. And just something in me slowly shifted where I just started it a little bit at a time. And I just started really pushing myself where I was like, okay, I've got to do this vulnerability thing if I'm going to stay sober and if this is going to work. And so I did it, and it was very rewarding. And so over time, I started, to continue to push myself to do that.
What did you think about, like, when you came into your first 12-step meeting? What did you think about that whole setup where you talked about being skeptical, not wanting to be vulnerable, and you also had this, history with, a conservative family and the Christian school and all that. What was that like? Was the word God scary to you? Were you like, these people are cray cray?
I definitely, the word God, I didn't like that it was there. And I had, I identified as, I was, into deism at one point, and then kind of went more atheist, and then transitioned kind of into agnostic. And so, when I saw the word God, I definitely didn't like it. But someone just said that, look, it's not what you think. This is your own conception of a higher power, and this is not religious. And so, honestly, after that, I was just kind of like, okay, cool. And then I didn't really put much thought into it again until I probably had about 9 months sober, and then realized that I'd been tricked into spirituality. And I got really upset, and I was like, wait, what? Like, it hit me in this whole new way where I was sitting there reading a chapter in a big book study and was, reading a chapter I'd read so many times before, and it very clearly states that, our only way out is a spiritual solution. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, I don't want it though. But at that point I was already so far in.
Yeah.
I was like, you guys tricked me.
Yeah.
But what I've come to really realize is that, it has nothing to do with religion, and you don't ever have to define it. It's based, purely on our own experiences, and that, whatever preconceived notions we come in with, about God, about religion, about any of it, that those just kind of go away, and we're able to form something new based on concrete experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a huge speed bump for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And, I completely understand that. And I think, it's funny, I read that so many times, and I don't think it was till like 10 years sober that I was like, well, I guess I better like really start doing the spirituality thing, because I gotta I've done all the rest of the stuff, right? Like, I've faked it till I've made it 10 years, and now I have to seriously put some work into that. And I remember feeling very afraid when I realized, like, this is the depth. This is the core of the onion that we talk about peeling. Like, this is where this is the final frontier. And I remember feeling like really afraid, like, I can't do this. Like, this is not, like, I can do the step work. I can write the stuff out. I can, do the columns. But like, this for real, because I can't fake. My spirituality has nothing to do with what I tell you, right? So it's like, I can read you my fifth step or tell you what step I'm on, but like, my spirituality, like, that has nothing to do with you. It's an internal thing. Yeah. And so if I'm not doing it, I'm the only one who's like suffering from that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very much a personal, internal journey.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think it is a barrier to entry for a lot of people, especially young people. And so I'm always curious what people's initial response and how they get over that if they continue. And I think it's great that you didn't question it. You're like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, because my sponsor would always say the universe instead of God. She never said God. And even still, to me, I still don't even say God. I say higher power, I say source, I say universe.
Yeah, yep.
And so that was kind of my way around it.
Yeah.
And it has not hindered me at all.
Yeah, same. So what does your sobriety look like? You're 2.5 years sober now, and it sounds like you've done a lot of internal work. So you started getting vulnerable about 9 months. Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to really start to feel like vulnerability was a habit?
Probably about 1.5 years.
Okay.
I started working with a group called the Tribe of Elephants that specifically worked on, exploring spiritual laws. And, that part in the book where it talks about perfecting and enlarging on our spiritual life. And so anyone to be in the group, you don't even have to be in a 12-step program, but, it's open to anybody. And we would really just start to work on, questioning the beliefs that we have and figuring out if we have those beliefs because we were taught them or if it's because they're actually our own truth. And then exploring what, form spirituality actually has in our lives and what we're doing to, strengthen that connection. And so I think it wasn't until I joined that group at around 9 months, and that was my turning point of really starting to want to push myself and actually having a desire to get better.
Yeah.
And having a desire to, work on who I am as a person and to actually care about, what I'm bringing to the world rather than what I'm taking from it.
Yeah.
And that was a big turning point for me because I very much had the attitude of, hey, I agreed to get sober. I did not agree to try and be a better person.
Yeah.
And that was very much my attitude in the beginning. And it was like, I am here because drugs and alcohol stopped working.
Right.
Not because I wanted to get better.
Right. That was a huge... I don't think I thought about it that clearly. I sort of thought about it in the way of I have to be a better person in order to stay sober. That was just my interpretation. But I definitely remember thinking whoa. I'm here because I have a drug and alcohol problem and you're getting really carried away over here. Now we're talking about all sorts of stuff and I remember looking at the steps and talking to people. I was like, why is no one in this meeting talking about using or alcohol? What is going on? How is this going to help me with my near fatal drug addiction? What are you talking? I don't care about your day at work, or whatever. I just remember thinking okay,
where is the connection here?
Yeah. And really for me, everything else had to fail. And I really had to feel I don't know what's going to work for me. So I'm just going to do what they're doing because I don't understand what this is. Mm-hmm. I really don't. I don't think I still, I still think to myself I'll feel better when I go to a meeting or whatever. And I'm I've been in meetings, since I was 15 years old. What am I possibly going to hear? And then every time I do feel better and I grow and blah, blah, blah. So I just have pushed part of my brain to stop asking questions around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why that desperation is so necessary when people come into the program, because
the gift of desperation.
Exactly, because you have to be beaten into a state of reasonableness. You have to be out of your own ideas.
Yes.
And
completely
you have to be done fighting. And for me, I'm so grateful that I waited until I was really ready to show up and to try, because otherwise I think I would have ruined my experience with it, and then I would have walked away believing that it didn't work for me.
I think a lot of people do that. I'm grateful that you survived long enough to have your own experience with that, because I also think that a lot of people, they don't, that they would not live if they didn't try, if they didn't have those periods of sobriety. Mm-hmm. I definitely think I'm one of those people. If I had waited till I was ready without any intervention, I would not have survived.
Absolutely.
I would not have survived just because of the way that I was using at people. Mm-hmm. And I think that there was just no way I was gonna, and in this fentanyl climate, there's not a chance in hell I'd survive.
Absolutely.
Not a chance. So,
well, and that's why I even loved hearing your story, because, anytime I have a woman who comes to me and, they're 17, 18, and I have a hard time in my mind really wrapping my mind around the idea that was it bad enough for you to be ready?
Yeah.
And I loved hearing your story because that was so apparent that you were going to die and you needed to do something about it right away. And so I love that, your story really demonstrated that. And I think it will even help me moving forward in trusting that if somebody is here, this is exactly where they are supposed to be.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad it was useful. It's funny, even, I don't know if I talked about it in my story, but like it took me 2 years in sobriety after that to admit to my innermost self that I was alcoholic. Like I still wasn't sure. I was like, yeah, I'm a heroin addict, but I don't know about this alcohol, And I remember telling myself that I was not going to drink or use, or no, I'm sorry, I was not going to relapse because I was just trying to like justify drinking.
Yeah.
I was not going to drink. Meanwhile, I've already done this experiment. It didn't go well. And I was like trying to justify drinking. And I was like, I'm not going to drink until I know either way. And then I can make a decision. I can say, screw it, I want to do it anyway. Or I can say like, no, I really am. And I remembered I remember where I was sitting. I remember what I was doing. I was rewriting a first step. And I was writing out all the things specific to alcohol because I think when you do a lot of drugs, at least for me, it can get confusing about like, well, alcohol's different, like, which I don't, in retrospect, it's like, it literally does, like, affects you from the neck up. Like, it's just legal in a bottle. Like, it's a drug.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting on my bed, writing out this first step and like, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic. Oh my God. And I was writing out like all the different things. And I was writing out that I would wear, when I was 16, I would wear diapers because I would constantly pee myself. Oh, yeah. And like what 16-year-old wears adult diapers instead of and I'm writing this out and like that realization, 2 years sober.
Yeah. Well, and I love those little negotiations and like compromises and like just those little like deals that we make with ourselves about, okay, I'm not going to drink until I know certain.
Yeah. And, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing.
Mine when I got in there, because the thought of going the rest of my life without drinking was absolutely incomprehensible to me. I was just like, I can't even begin to wrap my head around that. And so I said, I'm going to do 6 months. And if my life isn't better in 6 months, then I'm going to go back to what I was doing. And so that got me through 6 months. And then 6 months came around and I was like, you know what? I feel better. Like things are slowly improving and like I kind of want to see where this goes. So I'm going to give it a year. And then by the time I hit a year, I was like, I wouldn't trade this for anything in the entire world. And I was there. But I needed those little deals with myself to get there.
Oh, yeah. Another one I had was if I wanted to drink, I was allowed, because I'm like you, don't control me. Do not tell me what to do because I will do exactly what you tell me not to do.
Yes.
And so one of them was I can drink. I'm allowed to drink. Not like this BS of like, we'll just have a drink tomorrow. Like I literally am going to drink. But I cannot make the decision to drink and take the drink in the same 24 hours. So that was like, I was like, if I want to drink in 24 hours, if it's still a good idea, it's still going to be a good idea.
Yeah.
And so that was like a deal that I made with myself, but not like how a lot of the sponsors were like, you can drink tomorrow. Like I was like, you know what? That's a trick.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You're lying. You're going to say the same thing.
Someone else is doing it.
Totally. Like you're going to say the same thing tomorrow. But my thing was like, no, I'm going to make the decision now. And if it's still a good idea in 24 hours, I'm going to do it. And it was never a good idea in 24 hours. And but I meant it. I was really like, I will drink in 24 hours. But the conviction that those little rules and knowing that I could, if I needed that out or if it still made sense, like if I could still justify it, then I would do it. I don't know, that made me feel better than like one day at a time. We'll discuss it tomorrow. Like I could, I felt like I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
I see through this.
Yeah. And that's why it's helped me a lot in when I'm working with women, not trying to force them to mentally take it off the table before they're ready.
Right.
And that's been very important. And that's why I'm so grateful I've had that experience because if I had just come in and say, I'm swearing off forever and then, I was successful, I would be so much I'd be so much less patient with other people.
Totally. That's true. Like having had that experience. Yeah. It's the same with like the toxic boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes.
they're ready when they're ready. Like you just have to accept they're going to go back, and like you just leave a space for them to show up when they're ready. Because people just, you know, when you're in a relationship, whether it's with a substance or a person like that, you have to be ready because it's too hard. The work is too hard to do if you're not totally desperate and willing.
Absolutely. And in a weird way, I think, you know, looking back at some of the behaviors that I kept with me, you know, all the way up through, you know, even a year, maybe even a year and a half of really unhealthy behaviors, in a weird way, I think those things kind of kept me sober.
Oh, yeah.
Before I was ready to rely on a higher power. Because for me, my higher power was the group for a long time.
Yeah.
And, you know, before I was really ready to give up this control and to, you know, I just wasn't ready to change everything from the very beginning. And I think that those things helped me along in a lot of ways. And so that's why, like, I don't get to determine the pace of anybody else's process, because had I had somebody who didn't understand it and had not been patient with me, I don't know if I would have made it.
Yeah. I still try to control like my husband's process.
Oh, I do too. Yeah. My boyfriend has 6 months sober right now, and it has just been a whole learning lesson.
Can we hurry this up? When do we get to the good part?
Yes. My sponsor is like the reason I'm still in that relationship. Yeah. She has saved me from being a controlling psychopath.
Oh, yeah. My sponsor, too, actually. She was in my wedding for that reason.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, because I was just, like, still, you're just like, what do you mean they get to move at their own pace? Don't they know I'm involved in the relationship?
Right.
Like, this cannot happen, but it's the same thing. Like, no one's going to move me from where I am. Like, and not him, that's for sure.
Well, and I don't know if you're this way, but I definitely am. The second that I figure something out, even if it's been glaring for like a year and it's been causing harm in everyone's lives around me, but the second that I figure it out, I'm like, oh, this is phenomenal. This is incredible. I feel, you know, so enlightened. And then I go around demanding that everyone who's in my life figure it out at the same time because I have figured it out. And it is
just trying to help people. Jeez.
Yeah, it is out of control how quickly I will shift from like just complete obliviousness to like, I'm so enlightened and I have something that I need to teach you.
You need to know about this. Well, the best is like when you first get sober and you start looking around and you're like, wait a minute, you need this.
Yes.
And you're like Oprah with like 12-step program, like looking around and like, and you need a 12-step or you need a 12-step.
Yes.
Yeah, it's because it's like a new, you know, as they say, new pair of glasses, like as you literally look around, you're like, oh my God. But of course, you feel like you've made this tremendous change. It's been 2 months and your family is like, are you joking? You're like, I'm a new person. What are you talking about?
Right.
You know, give me the keys to the car.
Yeah, that demand to be trusted and to, you know, have everybody forget.
Like, what are you talking about? I've been sober 2 months. I am a new person.
Exactly. It's been forever.
Yeah. Why are you still bringing up the past? It was 3 months ago.
It's so easy for us to forget that we've been talking about this stuff. We've been healing from it. We've been growing.
Right.
There, you know, unless, you know, our families are going to other programs, they're not really healing from any of it. And so it still feels the same for them.
It's just the fact,
and
real
now
pissed.
they're really
now that they're not terrified,
once they
they're
get through
actually
the relief.
pissed.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're like, okay, she's not going to die. God, I'm so pissed at her.
Right. And we just want them to be stoked that like we're not adding new harm on anymore. Well, and then there's the whole thing of like, okay, yeah, I'm better, but like I'm still not great and I'm still not super pleasant to be around all the time in early sobriety because there's still so much discomfort and so much
crawling
growing.
out of my skin.
And so my parents were like, well, what's the deal? You know, you're sober. We thought things were, because they let me live at home for 2 years, my first 2 years sober, which I'm so grateful for. And I'm, you know, looking back, I can't believe that they stuck with me because I just at times had this attitude of like, well, I'm sober and I'm doing what I need to do and I don't owe anyone anything.
Right.
And not really fully grasping the damage that I've done.
Yeah.
And wanting that desire to just move on from it and not really wanting to go back and actually clean up the wreckage from my past.
Yeah. Yeah. It's seeing it from the other side, like seeing what it looks like. I was doing interventions for a while and being with the, it was, I really enjoyed it. Being with the families and the parents and experiencing it from that end it was so hard. It was, it was just emotionally so hard to see what I did through the eyes of the parents and like see how much they just wanted to lay on the train tracks for them and just make it go away. But also seeing how the translation of that came out. Like, it was like I would spend the time and the parents, see this like incredible love for their child. And then the child would show up and they're pissed that they're strung out. Like that's what it looks like. And totally having this understanding that they just don't know how to, like everybody is just completely in fight or flight, totally panicked, not at their best, not coming up, doesn't have coping skills, but like behind the curtain, seeing what that looks like for the family that's truly afraid that their child is going to die and they can't do anything about it. Oh, it was so heartbreaking. I remember calling my parents and just saying like, I'm so sorry, just like, just painful. And yeah, it's like, I really didn't understand how I always said to them, I'm doing this to myself. This is my choice. I'm not doing anything to you. Stop acting like I'm like hurting you when this is something I'm doing. Like I just did not get it.
Yeah.
I really thought that too.
I was the same way. I used to think that people's problems was just, the problem was that they cared too much. They cared too much what I was doing. They needed to mind their own business and then maybe it wouldn't impact them so much.
Exactly.
And
just let go.
It's just that delusional selfishness of I'm only hurting myself.
Yeah. And it's hard when you get to like face that up front when you realize like how much, and it's over time too, I think certain things have hit me when I had my twin boys, and over time just looking at them and thinking about that and like from a parental perspective, like knowing how you feel about your child and your child, like, so toddler boys, they're suicidal. Don't get it twisted. They're suicide. Like they jump off of things. They no helmet. When they're running into the street. Like it is like seriously might as well be a 5150 situation at my house at all times. So I can just imagine, like, I know what that feels like when my child, who's not unhappy, but just apparently wants to die, jumps head first off into the ground and is like, thinks that this is a great plan. I know what that feels like being the parent, just watching that. Yeah. Like just feeling like so helpless and like I'm not prepared for this. Like, where are the grown-ups? Someone help. And then taking that like and multiplying it by like 100,000 to a teenager or a young 20s or whatever, and them doing what they're doing. I just can't even imagine. And then that's when I start praying that karma is kind to me.
Yes. Well, and I think that was probably the two biggest pills for me to swallow in sobriety were, the first one was that I'm a people pleaser. That, and because me, I was like,
you're like, I don't care.
No, I'm fearless. I say what I want. I say what's on my mind.
I don't care how people.
I tell people the truth. I'm so manipulative and I hide and I pick and choose when to do that. And I'm harming people in the things that I'm telling them. It was that. And then the second one was that I'm a control freak. And that was so difficult for me to come to terms with. Coming into it, I was just like, I've never cared what anyone else is doing. I've never thought about what anyone else is doing.
Okay.
And no, I don't even think about I'm so wrapped up in what I'm doing. I'm not even thinking about other people. But then it was when I got sober that started really coming out. And I started to realize how much of a control freak I am and how strong of a desire I have to control other people's experiences.
Oh, yes.
And believe that I need to protect them from pain. I need to shelter them. And it's all that same stuff that I was pushing away from my whole life. And so it's been really cool getting to work on that side of things too, because I think for so many, when you see people who are sober but aren't doing any kind of a program, that's probably the biggest, trait that comes
really
out
bad.
Is that desire to control. And it's like
miserable.
Yeah.
It looks miserable.
Absolutely. And so like I'm so grateful that I've, gotten the opportunity to really work on that, because it comes out in the sneakiest ways, where like I'm only like 2 months into like actually working on an eating disorder that I didn't even think I had. And just starting
2 years, don't let it go. Do it now. Do it now.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's I ended up going into OA for real not this year, 2019. And I was saying to my sponsor, OA, for those of you who don't know, is Overeaters Anonymous, and it's all eating disorders: binge, purge, restrict, overeat, whatever it is. And I remember saying like, I have been here 6 months and I am not losing weight. Like, what is the problem? Like still missing the fact, like, it's a spiritual program wherever you go. It doesn't matter that I have 14 years sober.
Right.
Like, absolutely not. You cannot cash your AA chips in any other program. Sorry, not happening. And she goes, well, if you had lost the weight in the last 6 months, you wouldn't stick around to get the recovery. And I was like, oh my God, it's so true.
Yep.
It's so true. 6 months, if I lost all the weight, see ya, I'm out. Like that is how, like, and it's still like, I always say that I will use no matter what happens. I will use against my will no matter what happens. If I am not treating my disease, it won't be something I'm intentionally doing, or I won't be aware of it, or whatever it is. But rest assured, I'll find something to fixate on and use, and it will become that.
I will find something to do obsessively.
Yes, obsessively, yes.
And that's what I've even started to realize, because when I started working on this, I felt literally like I'd gotten sober all over again. It was incredible. I felt this like physical and emotional and spiritual connection to myself that I didn't even know was possible. And what I started to realize was how blocked off I had been. And I've started to realize that anything that we're doing obsessively, anything that we're using to cope, is what cuts us off from that spiritual connection. And that was something that like I really didn't fully grasp until recently. And that idea that now I'm back to praying and meditating like my life depends on it, because I know for a fact how unmanageable this eating stuff is for me. And I know that if I'm not, putting in that work, that I'm not going to be successful. Yeah. And so I'm remembering what it looks like to really surrender that area of my life. And it's improved my sobriety, and it's improved every other aspect of my life, because, all of it is digging deeper spiritually. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny because, I just went into to deal with the eating disorder, and I was like, I've done that. I got this. Like, it just knocked me on my ass, and it was like back to, those feelings and all that stuff. And I was like, oh my God, it's still a spiritual program. Like, oh no,
Which I'm not sure if it makes it easier or harder. Yeah. That it's like you're doing the same thing, but just
it makes it way
differently.
It makes it way harder, because I was like, okay, like I know. And I'm like, no, I need worksheets. I need homework. I need a retreat. I need a plan of action. I need, like all these. I was like, no, give it to me concretely. And it's like, it's a spiritual program. Like, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
I cannot survive in these conditions, like this is, but it's the same. I think what's great for me, I don't know if this is your experience, but what's great for me is that because I had no options left when I got to program, I experienced that things I didn't understand helped me. And so now I have that to refer back to, like, hey, dum-dum, you don't know how to fix this problem on your own. So this is that again. Just keep just that reminder of like, remember how you didn't know this was going to work last time? Well, that's the same thing here. And I'm like, okay. I'm just going to listen, do what I told.
That's funny. I just had a conversation with one of the women I'm working with on, she kept using this term, I have to just have blind faith. And I was like, why do you keep calling it blind faith? And she goes, well, I'm having to just, trust that I'm going to be okay, even though I don't know that. And I said, well, has there ever been a time since you've been sober that you haven't been okay?
Yeah.
She goes, well, no, I guess not. And I was like, so you have almost a year's worth of experience that shows you that you're always okay.
Yeah.
So it's not really blind faith.
Yeah.
You have concrete past history to look on showing you that you're always going to be okay.
Right.
And so it's the same idea with that, where it's like,
just keep referring back.
I just have to keep trusting. And it's like, at this point, it's I barely even think of it as trust anymore.
Yeah, you have evidence.
I already know it's going to be okay.
If this were Law and Order, the case would be shut.
Yeah, I already know it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
I just have to do what people tell me.
Oh, that's the hardest part.
Who know what they're doing, and I will be okay.
But I question everyone, and if they know what they're doing, and that's that's been like my control and my ego and my all those things of like I don't want to be told what to do, but my life depends on being told what to do.
Well, and also this is what, and I love that fact that you ask questions, because what it means is that you really learn the lessons. You're like, when you're going to help somebody with that, you're going to be able to tell them what they're doing, but you're also going to be able to tell them why they're doing it, because you asked questions along the way, and because you were so conscious of the process as you were going through it. And because in a lot of ways, I'm the same way. I approach it as like, I'm super willing to do what you want me to do, but can I ask them questions as to why? And I just want to know.
My husband puts me on question ban. That's a thing in our house.
I love that.
Because I ask so many questions, and I produced a mini-me, and now I know what it's like to have someone ask you questions like all day. But that's always, like, I'm a questioner. Like, I have questions about everything. That's why I do a podcast, so I can just ask questions. You know? Just ask people invasive questions, but it's like in a dome that allows me to do that. But yeah, I think that's a great part, and it's also the hardest part, because I saw a lot of people who didn't ask any questions, and they got it much faster than I did. They healed much faster than I did, because now they can't answer the same questions as well, so they're not great sponsors in that way for me, people like me, but they just shut up and did what they were told and didn't ask, like, yeah, but how does this work? And their lives got better much faster.
Yeah, it was definitely the question asking is in its own way, it's a form of resistance.
Oh, totally.
And that's all it is. And so, it just slows down the process a little bit. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Like you'll still make it, but it's just going to take a little longer.
It's going to take you longer. Yeah, I heard someone in a meeting the other day talking about how the pain is in the resistance. The pain is in the resistance. And like, with my personality, it's like it's like, I'm on default resist.
Yeah.
I resist before I even know what I'm resisting or why. Yeah. And so changing those default settings is so, vital to living a comfortable.
Oh, yeah. Well, and what's ironic is, so with the law of non-resistance, it's that whatever you resist
you
will
attract.
persist.
Yeah.
It's going to get bigger.
Right.
And like I talk with, that was first introduced to me in talking about emotions. It was that if you're really depressed and you're resisting the idea that you're depressed, you're going to feel more depressed because you're already depressed.
Right.
Now you're rejecting yourself for being depressed.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you just lean into the feeling, accept it, love yourself for exactly where you are in this moment, that is what will allow it to pass. So the pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Right.
Suffering comes from the resistance.
From the resistance. Yeah. I've been listening to the books, doing a lot of Gabby Bernstein.
Oh, yeah.
I'm obsessed. And
I've read Judgment Detox. Yeah. And what's the other one?
Super Attractor and Universe Has Your Back.
Is it Spiritual Junkie?
Oh, Spiritual Junkie.
Yeah, I've read those too.
Yeah. And she's in recovery as well, and talks about, she talks about a lot of ideas that work with my like brain that wants to know the scientific reason for things.
Yeah.
And that's been a really hard piece of spirituality. But the spirituality I've been able to access in these later years has been really cool around like learning about how like all things are made of atoms that are vibrating. Like everything is actually vibrating.
Yeah.
And like not like woo-woo, like for real.
Yes.
And anything that vibrates is going to vibrate at a frequency. And like, so learning this stuff that I was not open to, and stuff stuff in language I can digest, because my brain wants to go to like prove it to me.
Right.
And then I've come far enough that I can take the leap of faith with it. I can go, oh, there's some science around this. And then I can go like take the leap of faith of like, we attract the, like the kind of more abstract stuff.
Right.
But I've really had to seek. Like everything has been about, if I stop seeking, I stop growing and I get close to a drink.
Yeah, 100%. If I at any point am feeling stagnant, I don't believe that there's such a thing as being stagnant in the program. I think you're either growing or you're moving closer to a drink.
Yeah.
And I've seen that, in others. I've been fortunate enough to be able to learn from other people's experiences in that. And so, for me, and I push this with all the women that I'm working with, that I'm like, you're not here to maintain. We don't get that luxury.
Right.
We have to constantly be inspiring ourselves and pushing ourselves and growing and learning new things, and then ideally teaching it to the people who come after us.
Right.
And if you're not doing that, then like, yeah, you may stay sober. You see lots of people who stay sober who just maintain, but they're not thriving.
Right. And that's the whole goal.
Yeah, exactly. I think that we're here to thrive.
Right.
That is going to be our natural state of being if we don't get in the way of that process.
And that, so I think that's about, it's like learning that we're here to thrive, believing that we're here to thrive, and then taking the action, or figuring out, in my case, figuring out what the action is in order to thrive, and seeking and pushing towards that. But I do think there's a lot of like, well, life just sucks, and that's just the way life is, and life is hard, and life, it's
out to get me.
Yeah, like all these things that we tell ourselves, and really flipping the script on that of like, yeah, that's one choice you have of how you look at the world. And I think when you're sober, it's like you just don't have any, especially the longer you stay sober, you just don't have any tolerance for pain anymore. You just don't. Like, you just like, get me out, do whatever.
Yeah, whatever I need to do right now.
Clown suit, whatever needs to happen, just tell me what to do. And so that willingness and knowing you don't have like an easy out pushes you to actually work harder to create a thriving life, because the opposite for you is something you have to feel every single day.
Yeah.
Like you don't ever have a break from that, a mental like out, anesthesia. So whatever you're going to experience is what you're going to experience. You might as well make it good.
May as well. Well, and that was probably the first barrier that I made it past in my journey of spirituality, I think, was just allowing myself to say that I wanted to be happy. That was something that was so hard for me to admit. And I carried with me this idea that happy people are only happy because they're too stupid to know why they shouldn't be happy.
Right.
It's literally what I believed.
No, I get that.
And it took a long time for me to even recognize that I carried that belief with me, and that I was terrified of admitting that I wanted to be happy, because then what if the people around me know that I want to be happy, and then what if they fail, and then they know that I'm failing.
And now I'm a people pleaser.
Exactly. And it was just all of this, everything in my head was screaming at me to hold on to those beliefs. And once I started to shed those and allow myself to adopt new beliefs. And I remember, my first sponsor had told me, I came to her and I said, I think the universe is testing me. And she goes, well, why do you think that? And I said, I don't know, like bad things are happening. She goes, well, does it make you happy to believe that the universe is testing you? And I was like, no, not at all. She goes, cool, then don't believe it. Say it right now. Say, my higher power doesn't test me. And I said, my higher power doesn't test me. She goes, great, you just changed a belief. Look at that. Yeah. And I was like, wait, it's that easy? She goes, yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, cool.
I have to say it a lot more times than that. My brain is slow.
Usually, I think it's like between 10 and 20 times before. There's a certain amount of seconds that if you repeat it over and over again, like with an affirmation, that it will actually start to develop into the start of a belief.
Yeah. Which is like wonderful and terrifying.
Yeah.
Right? Because that means that other people can develop belief systems based on telling themselves that many times.
Yeah.
Good news is we can change it. Bad news, there's people out there creating all sorts of crazy stuff, but that's for another podcast.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I could talk about that for hours.
That's the scary part. So two questions. One is, what does the next year or like the next 6 months of Kim's sobriety look like? Like, what do you want it to look like? And what advice would you give to someone who is really struggling with, like, wants to get better, but is really struggling with like, this whole spiritual crap?
So next 6 months or so of my sobriety, honestly, I just hope that it continues moving exactly in the way that it is right now. I am at a very exciting time as far as my career, and I'm hopefully soon going to be transitioning out of, my very practical property management job into something that I'm more passionate about, which is life coaching and really working with people one-on-one and creating something that I believe is meaningful and impactful and that I really, really care about, and something that I think is utilizing, all of my strengths and all of the experience that I have. And, just continuing to be immersed in my 12-step program and, the work that I'm doing with other women. A lot more growing, a lot more healing, reading more books, more travel. We do retreats, periodically. And
I need a retreat.
Oh, they're so good. I get so antsy if I just got back from the one in Hawaii, and we're planning another one in the next few months. So
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely. I'll send you the info for it if you're interested in it at all. It's going to be phenomenal. But honestly, I'm at a point in my life where I've already exceeded all of my expectations and what I ever thought that I would have or accomplish. And I'm now reaching a point where I'm starting to achieve things that I didn't even know I had goals for. So
that's awesome.
So yeah, that's pretty much, it's really all I'm looking forward to, just more growth and more connection with people, because that's what makes me happy.
Yeah.
And then to somebody who's struggling with the spirituality of things, my super honest advice is to not rush. I don't think that everybody needs to get it right away. I don't think that if you don't get it right away, you won't stay sober. I believe that everyone truly moves at their own pace with that, and that the most important thing to do is accept yourself exactly where you are, be super honest and transparent about your beliefs and what you think and what your questions are, and to ask all of the questions that you want to ask. And that, whether your belief is there or not, it doesn't change what is actually there.
That's good, yeah.
And that base your beliefs on your own personal experiences and nothing else, not based on what people taught you, not based on what you think you're supposed to believe. Create your own experiences with it, and that it's not going to be what you think.
Yeah.
But that it's so much better than I ever imagined.
Yeah. I love that. It's definitely not going to be what you think.
Yeah.
Whatever you think it is, it's not that.
Yes.
It's definitely been my experience.
So my experience with all of sobriety, all of life in general.
I've gotten to this phase, I'm like, I have no idea what's happening.
I don't even bother creating expectations anymore, because I don't know what I'm walking into, and it's much better that way.
My kid turned to me the other day, and he's 3. He's my questioner, and he asked me if I was a grown-up.
Oh, yeah.
I have never been hit with such a challenging question in my life. I looked and I was like, fuck. What do I tell this sweet, innocent child?
Right.
I'm like, yes, I am technically considered grown up.
Some might say.
Yeah, I was like,
that I look like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Physically, age-wise, definitely.
Yeah.
But it was such a funny experience of like, the older I get, the more sober I get. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just, at this point, everything I thought I knew is wrong. Everything, every time I think I know something, or I'm like, I know what's up, it changes. So at this point, I'm just gonna go with the heart. I have no clue what's happening.
And it's so freeing when you can just say that. I have no idea, and it's not my responsibility to figure it out.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Although to him, maybe it's my
there's some responsibilities
exactly.
there.
I'll leave that. But for now, I'm just telling him I'm a grown up. Well, it's been so nice having you here, and I think that you're going to do amazing things in this program and out of this program, and I just really love that you're a perfect example of someone who took whether it was hard or not, you took the I had a nice home and a nice family and I'm just an alcoholic. Like that's just, it's the plain and simple of it. And you took that in stride. I think that's so valuable to people because I think there's so many people who are really confused and maybe get themselves into traumatic situations so that they have there's so many different situations. And I always feel terrible talking to those people because my story is full of all sorts of weird stuff. So, I can't affirm that in them,
right?
But I see it and I get it. And I hope you continue to share your story because we have plenty of us who, have like all the trauma and blah, 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 blah. But like people need to talk about the fact that like this is a brain disease. You can be born with it and nothing in your family went wrong. Like
Absolutely.
It's okay. You're still one of us. We still accept you. We still love you. And you don't have to like have any trauma. You don't have to be a Me Too victim. Like you don't have to. It's okay. Yeah. We don't look at you differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's a message we need to start talking about because I really am starting to feel like people who don't have trauma or people who haven't been, sexually assaulted or whatever, they feel left out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's definitely something that it's so important to understand the different forms that it takes and that it doesn't discriminate and that it's not necessarily, it doesn't have a cause that you can pinpoint.
Right. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's okay. So
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And I think the coolest thing about this podcast, and it's even just in the name, when I came into this experience, I did not believe that people were capable of change until I got sober. And that's why the second I saw the name, I was just, yes, I love what you guys are doing here and what you're creating is absolutely beautiful. And I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming in. This podcast is sponsored by Lion Rock Recovery. Lion Rock provides online substance abuse counseling where clients can get help from the privacy of their own home. They are accredited by the Joint Commission and sessions are private, affordable, and user-friendly. Call their free helpline at 800-258-6550 or visit www.lionrockrecovery.com for more information.